Princess Charlotte had always been a bright and energetic student, full of curiosity and excitement for learning. At just 8 years old, she had already shown a keen interest in history, literature, and even some of the more complex subjects taught at her prestigious school. However, one particular day would test not just her knowledge, but her resilience. It was a crisp autumn morning when Charlotte walked into her classroom, clutching her school bag a little tighter than usual. Today was the day she would receive the results of her history test, a subject she normally adored. But this time she felt uneasy. She had found the test difficult and had struggled with some of the key dates and events. As the teacher handed out the graded papers, Charlotte's heart pounded. When she finally looked at her score, her stomach dropped. She had failed. A large red mark at the top of the page confirmed it. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. She was a princess. She had to be strong. Yet, she couldn't shake the disappointment that settled deep in her chest. What would her parents say? What would Grandpa, the king, think? That evening, Charlotte sat at the grand dining table in Buckingham Palace, unusually quiet. Her parents, Prince William and Princess Catherine, exchanged glances, sensing something was wrong. But it was King Charles who spoke first. "Charlotte, my dear, is something troubling you?" he asked gently, setting down his fork. Charlotte hesitated, then reached into her school bag and handed him the test paper. The king studied it for a moment before looking up at her. "I see," he said, his voice calm and measured. "I tried, Grandpa," Charlotte whispered, her voice trembling, "but I didn't do well. I failed." King Charles leaned forward, his expression kind. "Do you know what failure truly is, my dear?" Charlotte sniffled and shook her head. "It means I wasn't good enough." "Oh no," Charles said with a chuckle. "Failure isn't about not being good enough. It's about learning. Even the greatest minds in history have failed before succeeding." Charlotte looked up, curiosity flickering in her teary eyes. "Really?" "Absolutely. Did you know that when I was a boy, I struggled with my studies too, especially Latin? I simply couldn't grasp it at first." She gasped. "But you're the king. You must be good at everything." King Charles laughed warmly. "Not at all. But do you know what helped me?" Charlotte shook her head. "I learned that failure is just a stepping stone. It teaches us where we need to improve. More importantly, I had people around me who encouraged me, just as I'm here to encourage you." Charlotte wiped her eyes, feeling a bit better. "So, what should I do?" "Well, let's start by reviewing what went wrong," Charles suggested. "I'd love to help you study. History is quite exciting when you see it as a story, rather than just names and dates." Charlotte's face brightened. "You'd really help me?" "Of course. What are grandfathers for?" And so, over the next few weeks, King Charles and Princess Charlotte spent time together in his study, reviewing history in a way that made it come alive. Instead of just memorizing facts, they acted out historical events, discussed the reasons behind great battles, and even visited museums where Charlotte could see artifacts up close. One weekend, King Charles took Charlotte to the British Museum, where they stood before the Rosetta Stone. "This is how we deciphered ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs," he explained. Charlotte's eyes widened in wonder. "That's incredible. Imagine if someone had given up before figuring it out." He smiled. "Exactly, my dear. Every great discovery is built on perseverance." Back at the palace, their study sessions became a cherished routine. Charles would tell her stories about historical figures who had faced adversity, like Queen Elizabeth I, overcoming doubts about her rule, or Winston Churchill's failures before leading Britain through war. "They didn't let failure stop them," Charles said. "Neither will you." With her grandfather's encouragement, Charlotte's confidence grew. She took another history test a month later, and this time received a much higher score. But more importantly, she had learned that failure was not something to fear. It was simply part of the journey. One evening, after receiving her improved test results, Charlotte ran straight to her grandfather's study, waving the paper excitedly. "Look, Grandpa, I did it!" King Charles took the paper, beaming with pride. "I knew you could, my dear." She hugged him tightly. "Thank you for believing in me." He held her close and whispered, "Always, my darling Charlotte. Always." That night, Charlotte placed her history book beside her bed, no longer dreading the subject. Instead, she dreamed of the many stories she had yet to learn. And with that, Princess Charlotte learned one of the most valuable lessons of all. Not just about history, but about perseverance, resilience, and the unwavering love of family.